looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today we're going to be discussing the beginning of voluntary OTAs, injuries, who's there, who's not, who's injured, who's not. We're going to be talking about Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall's contracts, the last dance nonsense that keeps being thrown around on social media. I'll explode that myth, and the three most improved position groups after free agency and the draft. And in the plus section, I'm going to review the third book of the three-body problem trilogy called Death's End, and also DC Comics' The OMAC Project from 2005. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So the beginning of this week, I'm recording on Wednesday, May 22nd. Voluntary OTAs have begun for the 49ers. One of the big nothing burgers that a lot of content creators on social media got wrong. But again, it's not about posting accurate content. It's just about posting content for engagement. There's a report that Jake Brendel, center, had knee arthritis. And that's just because people can't listen or they want to run with different stories. He has knee tendonitis. He isn't participating in OTAs. Now, tendonitis is not great, but it's a lot better than arthritis because arthritis is degenerative. It is not going to go away. It's only going to get worse. Tendonitis can be managed with medication, with direct injections to the patellar tendon, and of course, rest. So Brendel is one of the players that's injured. Defensive end Drake Jackson still coming off of knee surgery. Cornerback Charvarius Ward, who had a Pro Bowl and second team All-Pro season after the Super Bowl, had core muscle surgery. His abdomen wasn't really healthy the last month of the season, but gutted through it. Talanoa Hufanga, as you know, coming off of the ACL in his knee, and Dre Greenlaw, his Achilles, who gave an encouraging, update last week, but he also did say, I'm not going to go out there until I'm fully healthy, whether it's week 6, 8, 10. He's not going to put a timetable on it. And honestly, why should he? He's in a contract year. It does not really going to matter as long as he doesn't re-injure himself. And I'm certainly not wishing that by any means. I don't think Dre Greenlaw is going to be on the team after this season, just giving some salary cap restraints. But if he has a down year, of course, his agent's going to say, well, look what he did previously. He's coming off of an Achilles. Not, as a player, you obviously don't want to go out there until you're 100% healthy. But even if he has a down year, the agent's just going to wipe that away and say, don't look behind the curtain of, 2024, look at 2021, 2022, 2023, etc. But obviously Dre will not be out there probably until September or September practicing, probably not in game time until end of October. But who else was not there or not practicing? Christian McCaffrey was not there. And of course, when someone doesn't attend, again, it doesn't have to be correct. It just has to be content or strumming up controversy. And I'm seeing on Twitter, does that mean McCaffrey wants more money? I highly, highly doubt it, considering how much he's still getting paid as a average annual value top 2 or 3 running back. I'm not sure if Saquon Barkley's deal with the Eagles eclipsed what McCaffrey was making. I think it was $12 million annually. It's not about the money. He doesn't need to be there. It's voluntary, guys. Chris Conley, receiver, not there. This one is a little bit curious, though. Recently signed offensive tackle Chris Hubbard was not there, which is just interesting. Given a new addition to the team. Trent Williams, he knows what he's doing. He doesn't need to show up for voluntary stuff. Cam Latu, still not fully healthy coming off of the knee meniscus surgery, which happened in October. I don't know why he's not fully healthy yet. You're talking about 7+ months later. Malik Collins traded for from the Texans. Fred Warner there but not practicing. George Kittle there but not practicing. Jacob Cowing not there at all. Rookie 4th-round receiver out of Arizona. Interesting. Ayuk not there. Jennings not there. Not surprising given their contract statuses, plural. But veterans that were there, Nick Bosa was not there last year due to his contract holdout. That's big, veteran leader on the defensive end. He was there and practicing, as opposed to Fred Warner, who was there but not practicing. I'm not throwing shade at Fred Warner by any means, but as one of the leaders on the team, good to show that, someone like a Bosa and even Warner being there, that voluntary stuff is not beneath them. And I think for Bosa, not being able to get into the offseason program last year and how he started off slow and really wasn't getting his legs under him until really week 4 or week 5. This is big. This is big for him. Debo, part of the program, practicing, and obviously Brock Purdy being there, was part of the offseason program last year, ramping up after the elbow surgery, but this is technically his first full offseason as a starter. Now for Debo, I don't think he's there and practicing because there's competition in the form of Ricky Pearsall. Debo's a smart enough guy. I think he knows, there's no writing on the wall yet because Brandon Ayuk has not signed his long-term extension, which I still believe he will. It'll still happen before the season starts. I truly believe that's just a matter of when. But Debo, if Ayuk gets traded, then Debo's going to be there long-term, or at least in 2025 as well. But Ricky Pearsall, they're practicing. Indeed, he doesn't have a contract. And I'm going to talk about that next. But good for Debo being out there. I mean, he's had, a handful of leg injuries going back to his rookie year, hamstring. Hopefully, he's in better shape or hopefully he's in better shape now than he was in previous off seasons, especially the off season where he was dealing with his contract. Cardio for him, conditioning, getting the legs right. Now you could pull a muscle doing anything technically, but getting warm, getting the legs right, big for Debo in terms of preparation for the upcoming season. Now I mentioned Ricky Pearsall being there without a contract signed. Ayuk is not. Jennings is not. Jacob Cowing did sign his contract, but he is not there yet. But here's a thought, and this is just a thought. I'm not considering it a theory or anything out of the ordinary or based on anything. But San Francisco, per Spotrac.com, has less than $5.5 million in salary cap space, and that is not accounting for newly signed offensive tackle Chris Hubbard or a few rookies, meaning when you go on the website, you'll see that their contracts are not input into this system. However formalized it is, it's not, run in conjunction with the NFL, and none of these sports organizations are. It's just a site that aggregates data and contracts and free agency and whatnot. But the Niners are $5.5 million under the salary cap with a handful of people still not signed. Pearsall, Cowings, Jennings, among some other rookies, and Chris Hubbard, as I mentioned. Juwan Jennings has not signed his second-round tender that the 49ers placed on him basically 2 months ago. That tender is worth $4.8 million. And if he does not work out a long-term extension, which is questionable now, even though Ayuk's status is up in the air, when he signs, Debo's status beyond this year will be up in the air. They brought in Pearsall. They brought in Cowing. You still have Danny Gray under contract for 2024 and 2025 if he makes the team. Ronnie Bell under contract for this season plus 2 more seasons if he makes the team. So San Francisco may not be, I don't want to say willing, but looking to extend Juwan Jennings if they feel like they have replacements in-house that are much cheaper. But if Jennings had signed his second round tenure, the Niners would have less than around $500,000 in salary cap space. Ricky Pearsall's cap hit for being an end of the first round pick would be a little over $2 million. Those two players combined, San Francisco mathematically cannot sign. I'm wondering, and this is just a wonder, it's not reading between lines, I'm just looking at the math and going, I wonder. I wonder if San Francisco told Jennings, like, listen, hey, we placed a second round tender on you. Maybe they are still working out a long-term deal, in which case his $4.8 million hit for 2024 for that second round tender, which would be all on the 2024 cap. They're not prorating it or they're not extending it. There's no void years, anything like that. But if they extend them, maybe that number is cut in half. But maybe they're saying, hey, just wait until June 1st, June 2nd. Because then Eric Armstead's $18 million comes off the books and they get another $18 million to put towards Jennings and Pearsall, and Brandon Ayuk right now is scheduled to count $14 million. If they extend him, that'll drop. But, Jennings not being there, Hubbard, maybe them not announcing the numbers, or the same thing with some other rookies. I wonder if there is some way they're able to circumvent that and wait until June 1st, June 2nd, whenever they can actually use the $18 million from Eric Armstead's release to sign these players. Now, Ricky Pearsall, he's an interesting case because he's not under contract at all, but he was at the rookie camp. He is at voluntary OTAs. He's running routes, etc. All it takes, is a bad step like Dre Greenlaw in the Super Bowl, and even one of the defensive coaches in the Super Bowl who tore his Achilles as well, jumping up and down on the sideline. Takes a bad step for a knee, for an Achilles. He could fall down wrong, have, shoulder surgery. Knock on wood, not wishing any of that stuff. But Pearsall's out there playing without a contract, which means, and now for him, I'm basing this on nothing other than just wild thoughts going through my brain. I wonder if there's some sort of, he signs, not a waiver, but some sort of insurance that if he gets hurt before his contract is signed, then he would still get some sort of a payout if he has a career-ending injury or misses a year or whatnot. Pearsall not signing is still confusing to me because, again, it's the draft. The salaries are slotted. He's going to make a little bit less than the 30th player taken overall and a little bit more than the 32nd player taken overall. And it's going to be a little over $2 million, which they can obviously fit with $5.5 million in cap space left. He's the only rookie left to be left unsigned, which is still curious, but kudos to him for deciding not to sit out, for deciding to participate in rookie and mini camp. And people are going really nuts on their projections for Ricky Pearsall, and they need to kind of slow down. Even saying, Ricky Pearsall is getting first team snaps and OTAs because Brandon Ayuk isn't there. Guys, they're like hour and a half practices with a helmet, a jersey, and shorts on. No pads, no tackling. Sometimes you're running routes against nobody. They are playing 7-on-7. They are playing 11-on-11 at times. It's basically two-hand touch football. Better to get the reps than not. I get it. But this is not doing really anything. It's marginal at best that it's accelerating Ricky Pearsall's growth because Brandon Ayuk isn't there. Come on. Let's not hunt for things. Sure, he's getting maybe a couple extra snaps because Ayuk's not there. It is negligible. It is marginal at best. Let him take advantage of it. It's more going to be being in the books, understanding the offense, understanding what his position is going to be. Is he the X? Is he the Y? Is he going to play some slot? He needs to understand the offense, I think, mentally just as much as physically. So does Jacob Cowing, the offensive lineman, Puny, Kingston, free agents that are brought in. But let's not make too big a deal about the snaps that he is getting because Ayuk isn't there. And let's slow down on the projection that people have for Ricky Pearsall. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So OTAs, a whole bunch of nothing burger. At least it's something to read news-wise about how sharp or not sharp Brock Purdy is. It doesn't matter. He's an MVP candidate. How sharp or not sharp defensive players look, or conditioning, guys, first couple practices. Doesn't matter, but I understand why content creators and trolls out there have to make absolute declarations about this player is going to be good, this player is not going to be good, because logical, common sense takes, which I try to be about on this podcast, and even when I post so infrequently on Twitter, it's not going to move the needle, right? And I don't care about engagement or monetization. I do this for fun. And whoever's listening, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. But we don't have to live in an absolute black and white, absolutist world when we make statements or proclamations about stuff, because the vast majority of the time it comes across as disingenuous for just engagement or just plain stupid. One of the stupid things that's been circling, hopefully it's circling the drain and not going to come back, but making its rounds on social media is this whole last dance for the 49ers narrative, comparing it to the 1998 Chicago Bulls after they finished their second three-peat by defeating the Utah Jazz in 6 games. Now, after that championship, the Bulls were utterly and completely dismantled and obviously have not been to a finals since, and maybe have only been to one conference final since then, and we're talking 26 years at this point. But after that season, they lost head coach Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr, Judd Bushler, Luke Longley. You lost essentially 3 to 4 starters. Dennis Rodman wasn't a full-time starter, but he was playing 30, 35 plus minutes a game. So you wound up losing 6 players that played starter minutes. And in 1999, only 6 players from that championship team returned. So that means 60% of the roster was gone, and basically 80% of your starters. If 80% of the 49ers starters are gone, you're talking about 17 or 18 of 22 starters from one year to the next. That's not going to be the case. Every year in the NFL is a last dance for that roster, regardless of team. And you could even say regardless of sport. Because there's never going to be a season in any sport where there is no turnover, where you're going to have the absolute same team from one season to the next. And I'm going to go back to after their 2019 season to explain why every season there was the 49ers' last dance, and they kept being competitive outside of 2020 when they were just beset by injuries. After their Super Bowl season in 2019, they lost defensive tackle DeForest Buckner, defensive tackle Sheldon Day, wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, cornerbacks Jason Verrett and Dante Johnson. So essentially 2 to 3 starters gone. After the COVID year in 2020, coming off of whatever were they, 6-10, they lost third wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, starting running back Tevin Coleman, defensive lineman Kerry Hyder, Solomon Thomas, and Ronald Blair, cornerback Richard Sherman, and cornerback Akello Witherspoon. Again, 2 to 3 starters gone. 2021, they make it to the NFC Championship game, lose to the Rams in Los Angeles. So that 2020 last dance didn't seem to hurt them too much. After the 2021 season, they lose safety Jaquaski Tart, nickelback Quan Williams, offensive lineman Laken Tomlinson, and Tom Compton, wide receivers Richie James and Trent Sherfield, running back Raheem Morris, who remember had a huge game back in 2019 in the NFC Championship game, but still a very productive but injured running back, defensive lineman G.J. Jones, starting nose tackle, and utility D lineman Arden Key. Guys, that's 6 starters in 2021. The 2021 last dance of the 49ers making the NFC Championship game lost 6 starters. And what happened in 2022? They made the NFC Championship game again. And after the season, they lost starting tackle Mike McGlinchey, starting guard Daniel Brunskill, starting defensive end Samson Ebukam, other D linemen Charles Amenahu and Jordan Willis, third linebacker Azeez Al-Shire, starting safety, and then nickelback Jimmy Ward, and starting cornerback Emmanuel Mosley. 5 starters again gone from the 2022 last dance season of the 49ers, who made the NFC Championship game. And what happens in 2023 after those losses? They make the Super Bowl. And this season, which is being called the last dance again, they lose defensive tackles Eric Armstead and Javon Kinlaw, defensive ends Cleveland Farrell, Chase Young, Randy Gregory, wide receiver returner Ray McLeod, and number 2 tight end Charlie Werner. So that's, again, another 2 to 3 starters gone. Guys, every year is a last dance. Or it's the end of a certain kind of dance. Maybe it's a polka, and this year is going to be line dancing. Maybe next year's reggae, and the year after that is some sort of a country or slow dancing. The Niners are always going to be dancing, just like every other team in the NFL or every other sport. In the NFL, there's always going to be about 20 to 30% turnover in your roster. Now, it's not always going to be it's never, I should say, too absolute. Let me take it back. It's almost never going to be as destructive as what the 98-99 Bulls went through from one season to the next. Losing the best player ever in Jordan, a top 50 player in Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman, and your starting center. I mean, that when you lose 60 to 80% of your starters, you're going to feel it. And of course, the Bulls did. They were terrible for a long time. The Bulls lost their entire core. Entire core. That's what a last dance is, guys. A last dance is, you remember the Florida Marlins? They've won the World Series twice this millennium. So twice in the past 25 years. Who did they beat? The Yankees one year, and I forget who they did the other year. But after each one of those World Series, completely dismantled. Completely. Where they were nobody and also ran a garbage team the next year. Management didn't want to pay anybody. They got their rings plural. Jettisoned, traded, released players for lower salary. That's a last dance. When you look at the 49ers core, they have one. And it's not all that old. Who are your core players on offense? Brock Purdy. Trent Williams getting up there in age this year or next year might be his last season. George Kittle. For everybody wanting to write off George Kittle, he's 3 to 4 years younger than Travis Kelce, and Kelce was given a contract extension. Anybody saying that Kittle's not going to get another contract, listen, there's a possibility he doesn't. He's very important to this offense, blocking and receiving. And as he gets older, I've said before, Shanahan should transition him from being such a blocker or so important of a blocker, being a 6th offensive lineman at times, that he could be more of a Travis Kelce, more of a 80% receiving threat and block 20% of the time. I'm just making up numbers. Brandon Ayuk. Firmly believe he's going to sign long-term. He's part of the core. McCaffrey is part of the core. Even though he's only under contract this year and next year, he could transition after 2025 into a very solid third down back. He won't be making $12 million a year. Maybe it's half that or less, or maybe another team's going to wildly overpay him for the name and what production they think they're going to get out of him. But he could still be a very important piece in part-time duty. And if you want to say Ricky Pearsall, and because we haven't even seen him on the field yet, but he's a first-round pick, he's a pick that they are banking on, will replace some, if not a lot of, if not all of, in time of the production that Deebo Samuel brings. Maybe not running, but as a receiver, Ricky Pearsall very well is part of the core as well. Deebo, as I said before, is going to be gone after this year. Okay, you're gonna lose him, and of course you're going to lose some role players, but you're going to have younger people. Is a Braden Willis or a Cam Latu at tight end going to step up? Is Dominic Puny or Jarrett Kingston going to be stepping up and become a quasi long-term fixture on the offensive line? Is Isaac Guerrero potentially going to step up and be a lead back in time to help McCaffrey transition to a third down specialist role maybe in 2026? I don't know. Defensively, who's your core? It's Bosa, it's Warner, and I think the arrow is pointing up that it could be Jair Brown at safety. Now, who else could it be? I think Diamador Lenore gets re-signed. I think Charvarius Ward is going to be too expensive, even though he has a dead cap hit of over $10 million next year, and re-signing him would actually lower that, so it might make sense. But Ward is going to be 30, whereas I think Lenore is only going to be 26 or 27, so they have to weigh that also. Renardo Green, we haven't seen him yet. Second-round pick. You're getting picked that high. Obviously, the team thinks highly of you, so he has the possibility, much like fourth-round rookie Malik Mustafa, has the potential to be part of the defensive core. Has the potential, guaranteeing nothing. Linebackers, maybe one of D. Winters or Jalen Graham, could potentially be part of the core moving forward. Again, guaranteeing nothing. I'm just giving possibilities. Because I think Charvarius Ward after this season is probably gone. Dre Greenlaw after the season is probably gone. Talanoa Hufanga after this season is probably gone. And there's the possibility that Javon Hargrave, just given what his cap number is going to balloon to next year and how the Niners could get out of it and realize some significant savings, that's a possibility. Now you're talking about, of those four players, one player at every level. Hargrave on the D-line, Greenlaw at linebacker, Ward at corner, and Hufanga at safety. That's slightly over 33% of the defense, but there's a pipeline, right? There is a Jair Brown here. They drafted a Malik Mustafa. You're bringing in Renardo Green. You have two young linebackers. You could find, I mean, they brought Devondre Campbell in this season. If he performs well or well enough, and they get rid of Greenlaw, they could sign Campbell again, maybe to a one-year deal at a fraction of what Greenlaw is going to demand, or command on the open market. It's okay to lose, again, if it's the last dance for the Niners, then the entire core is gone. All the players I mentioned to you, Purdy, Williams, Kittle, Ayuk, CMC, Pearsall, maybe, Bosa, Warner, Jair Brown, Lenore, all of these players, would be gone. It's not the case. The Niners, with Purdy getting an extension, are going to have to, or we as fans, because the Niners understand this, but fans don't, Purdy making $50+ million a year, which is what he's going to get, means you can't have two high-priced corners. Maybe you can have one. You can't have two high-priced defensive ends. You have one in Bosa. You can't have two high-priced linebackers. You can have one in Fred Warner. Right now, they don't have any high-priced safeties, and I don't think Talanoa Hufanga is going to come back. So you're going to go inexpensive and young in the secondary. On the line, they're not spending significant money outside of Trent Williams. You can't so they're not going to have two high-priced tackles, and nor do they right now, even though Colton McKivitt's got a $7 million extension for 2025. That's peanuts. That's like a quarter of what Trent Williams is making. And if you want to say Trent Williams is 4 times the player of Colton McKivitz, I'm not going to argue with you. But Colton McKivitz is very serviceable. They're going to go young on the interior of the line with Puny and Jarrett Kingston. They're not going to re-sign Aaron Banks. Again, they're just not going to. They're not going to be able to afford everybody. You can have a high-priced receiver. It's going to be Ayuk. Deebo's going to be gone. You're going to have Pearsall. You're going to have Cowing. You're going to have Ronnie Bell cheap. Maybe they bring back Juwan Jennings and something affordable. And you have one high-priced tight end in Kittle. There's obviously no reason to pay more than one. And one high-priced running back in McCaffrey. There's no reason to pay more than one. Right now, San Francisco still has the best roster 2024 in the NFL. Even with the departures that I was talking about next year, Debo, Ward, Hufanga, Greenlaw, maybe Hargrave. Is that going to hurt? Sure. You got to hope backups. And remember, it's not just looking at who's on the roster now. It's free agency next year. It's a draft next year. There's going to be players on the team this year that are going to get more experience and hopefully take another step forward next year as these players I mentioned move on in 2025. It's not sexy to have a logical, level-headed approach to this. It's not logical to say, well, you can't pay everybody. I mean, it should be logical. People have the mentality that this sport and their favorite team and players that they're very passionate about is the equivalent of Madden football, where you can turn the salary cap off. You hear and see all the time people making stupid trade scenarios where it'll work in Madden, but it's not going to work in real life. And even with some of these departures, or all of these departures that I mentioned, after this season, the Niners will still have a top 5, top 3 roster in the league. It's not even a reloading situation, guys. It's not a reloading situation. It's either if you want to call it a retooling situation, that is the strongest I would go. It's a tinkering situation. It's a supplementation situation. And it started this year in the draft. And let's transition now to the 3 most improved position groups on the team this year compared to the 2023 season. We're going to go in, if you want to call it reverse order, number 3. We're going to lead up from 3, 2, and then 1. Wide receivers. They only lost Ray McCloud. This year, they still have Debo. They will still have Ayuk. And they will still have Juwan Jennings, whether if it's just for this year or they sign him to a modest extension. Chris Conley re-signed. We'll see if he makes the team or the practice squad. Right now, Ronnie Bell is under contract for 3 more years. And if Ronnie Bell is your number 5 or number 6 receiver, you could do a lot worse. Danny Gray is still on the team. I'm not sure if he's going to make the team or not, but he does add a speed element, and he just hasn't put it all together, either due to being a rookie or being injured. But he was on the team last year. He didn't play it all last year, so you could even consider him a free agent addition that did not contribute or compete in 2023. They brought in Trent Taylor basically just for punt returns. He probably won't make the team, but Kyle Shanahan is very neurotic and has trust issues when it comes to certain things. And if he feels that Trent Taylor is the best punt returner on the team by far, he very well may make it as wide receiver 6. But they also added Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing. Now, I'm not going to put too much pressure on these 2 rookies that they're going to make such a splash that it's going to transform the 49ers offense that was, top 3 in most categories last year, that they're going to push the Niners over the top for a couple reasons. And I mentioned it last podcast or the podcast before. Shanahan plays 11 personnel, meaning 3 wide receivers, 1 running back, 1 tight end, the second fewest snaps in the league last year. Only 1 team had 3 wide receivers on the field less often than San Francisco, and there were 0 snaps, 0 in total for 2023 when 4 or 5 pure wide receivers were on the field. None. Because they have Kittle, because they have McCaffrey, and because they can line Juszczyk out wide as a matchup problem for linebackers. That being said, Cowing does bring a Ray McCloud speed and twitchiness element. Ricky Pearsall with hands, being a strong and supposedly fearless receiver over the middle. Was in college. I don't think that's going to change in the pros. Good route runner. But you have 3 embedded receivers in front of you, right? In Ayuk, Debo, and Jennings. And you have Kittle, and you have McCaffrey. I'm seeing crazy predictions from like 600 to 800 receiving yards for Ricky Pearsall. Slow down. If he gets half that, with a healthy 49er receiving core, consider it a win. Remember last year, Juwan Jennings had what? 17 or 19 receptions. And I know everyone's going to say, oh, he was big in the Super Bowl, caught a touchdown, threw a touchdown, and he might have been MVP if they won. That's great. You know, anybody could have a good game. Larry Brown, Cowboys cornerback in 1995, had 2 interceptions off of Neil O'Donnell, was the MVP of that game, got a huge contract by the Raiders, and was never really heard from again. You can't put too much on these rookies, but why I think this is the number 3 improved position group is because of the depth. Ronnie Bell as a rookie, 7th round pick. Okay. Wasn't great handling punt returns, but was, had a couple touchdowns. Pearsall's an upgrade. Danny Gray didn't play at all last year. If Jacob Cowing is healthy, he's an upgrade. And Chris Conley, elevated to the active roster for the playoffs and Super Bowl, I think is a nice veteran presence on the team, but I don't think he's part of the 53. I think he's on the practice squad that they can call up and know that he knows what's going on if he needs to step in, either week to week or long-term should someone be placed on IR. While it was head-scratching to a lot of us when Pearsall was the number 1 wide receiver taken, the Niners took the long view, knowing that one of Debo or Ayuk, it's going to be Debo, won't be on the team after this year. Jennings probably won't be on the team after this year as well. I mean, there's the chance they could work out a long-term extension. So they brought 2 receivers in to make up for those potential 2 wide receiver defections after this upcoming season. But the depth is better. Number 2, the defensive line. Now they lost Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw at D tackle, and 3 DNs I mentioned earlier, Chase Young, Cleveland Farrell, and Randy Gregory. Chase Young, more name than game, big time October trade, excited to play with Nick Bosa, his old Ohio State running mate. Got called out a couple times for lack of effort. Got a big contract, $13 million by the Saints. See if he can revive his career. Cleveland Farrell got hurt toward the end of the season. Did not have a great year. And Randy Gregory was really coming in sub packages and pass rush packages as well. Javon Kinlaw, bust. Hopefully he's healthy for the Jets. I wish him no ill will. And Eric Armstead, often injured. Good player, very good player, often injured. Who they bring in? Malik Collins, D-tackle from the Texans. Jordan Elliott, D-tackle from the Browns. Leonard Floyd, D-end from the Bills. Eugenio Gross-Matos, D-end from the Panthers. I think this is, if everyone's healthy, because anybody can get hurt at any point in time, this is addition by historically healthier players. And I said before, Leonard Floyd, 3 straight years of 9+ sacks, the best defensive end running mate that Nick Bosa has had in his time on the 49ers. And Eugenio Gross-Matos, a D-end, battling the number 3 end. He's probably the de facto number 3 D-end right now, battling with Drake Jackson and Robert Beal, who are still here, as are Javon Hargrave and Kevin Givens at D-tackle. And some, Evan Anderson, an undrafted rookie free agent, T.Y. McGill, a veteran that, if the Niners keep 5 defensive tackles, could potentially be in play. But I think the line's going to be better. I think Nick Sorensen, coaching, working with Chris Kosorek, I think they're going to get back to being a bit more dominant as a run defense. And if Floyd plays to the level that he's played in previous seasons, remember, he hasn't had Nick Bosa on the other side of him the past couple years. When he was playing with the Rams, he had Aaron Donald. When he was playing with the Bills, he had a basically past his prime Von Miller. I think it's very realistic that Floyd gets 8, 9, 10, maybe 11 sacks this year playing on that line opposite Bosa with the rest of this, Pro Bowl, all-pro studded defense. I think the line's going to be better. But the number 1 most improved position are cornerbacks. And we're talking addition by subtraction right off the bat. They lost Isaiah Oliver, who only started 2 weeks and was gone. Now he's on the Jets as well. They brought in veterans Isaac Yadam from the Saints, Rock Ya-Sin from the Ravens, and drafted Renardo Green from Florida State in the second round. To go along with Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, Darrell Luter, Samuel Womack, and Ambry Thomas. Guys, Thomas is going to be gone. I keep saying it. I guess I'm going to say it. I want to speak it into existence. I think we outside of injuries, I think we know that's going to happen. And I think your starters are going to be Ward and Yadam on the outside and Lenore inside. I think that's your best combination of players. You know, Lenore could beat out Yadam on the outside, but then it's going to either force, Rock Ya-Sin or Renardo Green to play the slot. And I think Lenore played slot so well last season. Why would you rock that? Don't rock that boat. Figure out who's going to play outside. I don't think they're going to give it to a rookie in Renardo Green. I think Isaac Yadam is built in the same height and length kind of body type that Charvarius Ward is, and I think it's going to be his job to lose, and I think he's going to win it. And I think your depth behind those three is maybe stronger than it's ever been. Rock Ya-Sin's a veteran. Renardo Green, rookie, can play some press man, can play slot, can play outside. And Darrell Luter, last year's 5th round pick. I do think they are going to go 6 corners on the 53. Strongest cornerback group that I think the 49ers have had since Kyle and John have taken over. Same with receivers. I'm not sure about the D-line. Maybe that 2019 D-line. Bosa, D Ford when he was healthy, Buckner and Armstead with, marginal depth kind of behind them. But I think that was a very good defensive line. Just remember too, though, we romanticize that line because they made it to the Super Bowl. And even though it's not all about sacks, that defense, the D-line leading the way, had just as many sacks as last year's defense under Steve Wilkes. So receivers, then D-line, and first cornerbacks. The 3 most improved position groups, Kyle Shanahan, works magic on offense. So one of the 3 being an offensive position group, and I think the fact that it's your front end and your back end, I think is a good sign in terms of improvement over last year that can help the 49ers get back to playing the kind of defense that Shanahan Lynch and new coordinator Nick Sorenstam wants to play. That concludes the 49ers section of the podcast. Thank you for listening, but stick around in the plus section. We're going to be talking 3 Body Problems science fiction trilogy series, book 3, Death's End. I have a summary and review for you, in addition to DC Comics series, the OMAC project from early 2000s. Finish that. Want to talk about that as well. Stick around.
It's plus time.
So I recently finished the 3rd book in the 3 Body Problem trilogy titled Death's End. I actually listened to it. Obviously big into audiobooks now. And for those of you that seen the Netflix series, and if you guys don't want to have the end of the series spoiled, feel free to just not listen or skip ahead. Just be warned that Season 2 is probably not going to come out until late 2025, early 2026. Season 3 will not be out till 2027. Netflix has given the green light for the final 2 seasons, and originally the showrunners thought that they were going to have 4 seasons in total, but it's going to be 3. And the 3rd season, it's been announced, will be released in 2027. So between, in 3 years from now, you may forget anything that you're going to hear, but just wanted to give you the warning that there are spoilers ahead. Now, the end of the 2nd book had one of the main characters, Luo Ji, threatening the aliens, the Trisolarans, that he would reveal their homeworld and the Earth's position out there to the universe if they didn't turn around. And the aliens did. They decided that they weren't going to come to attack or colonize Earth anymore. And the 2 civilizations or species remotely wound up kind of collaborating, scientifically, etc. So the 2nd book ends, and you're like, where the heck is book 3 going to go? Book 3 went all over the place, spanning the timeline of humanity into the millions of years. We will get to that shortly. But it begins with a story thread from season 1. For those of you that have watched, so the season 1 of the Netflix show did a really nice job, including basically all of season 1, all of book 1, story threads from book 2, and another story thread from book 3. And the story thread from book 3 is, book 3 more or less beginning by going back in time to what they're calling the crisis era, when the Trisolaran aliens were on their way, when their fleet was on their way to Earth to conquer us. And this is where a new character, at least for the book series, named Young Tianming, is dying of cancer. And he winds up coming into, I'm going to simplify a lot of this, especially when we get into the scientific stuff, guys. Plus, otherwise, I could probably spend an hour and a half just on this book. It's so dense. But young Tianming is dying, and he winds up using this windfall of money that he's come into to purchase a star, an outer space star system, for his old college crush, a female named Chang Xin. Chang thinks of him, hasn't seen him in years, and visits him in the hospital, finds out that he's dying, visits him in the hospital, and convinces him to volunteer for the Staircase Project, which is, again, so this whole situation, dying person, love interest, purchased a star, Staircase Project, happens in season 1, the latter half of season 1 of the Netflix show. And that Staircase Project is harvesting the brain of someone, putting it in a capsule, and sending it on a trajectory towards the Trisolaran fleet with the thought that the Trisolarans will intercept the brain, regrow that person, and then they would have someone on the inside, quote unquote, when the Trisolarans advance. That's a very ballsy and out there proposition and plan, but they went for it. And just like in the TV show, there's a malfunction with this very small shuttle, and it goes off course, so it is not heading toward the Trisolaran fleet any longer. Then after Liu Ji at the end of the second book threatens the Trisolarans and says, "I'll broadcast our position." At this point in time, the book jumps ahead, and now we're in the deterrence era. Chang Xin goes into hibernation for 50 years, awakens, and now we're in the deterrence era where humanity is deterring the Trisolarans from coming to Earth. When she comes out of hibernation, she becomes nominated as the sword holder. So basically the person that is holding the button, quite literally, holding the button to press to send out that signal into the universe for other civilizations to learn where both the Trisolarans are from and where Earth is. That was falling to Liu Ji, who at this point is now in his 80s, and he basically lives underground. His entire existence is very much like a monk. He sits holding this trigger all day, staring at a wall. Now, while this kind of sounds interesting, like when you read it in a book, the practicalities of this are just obviously ridiculous. Are you taking it in there when you take a dump? You have to, do you ever sleep? He doesn't leave a certain room. They don't talk about where his sleeping quarters or anything. He is just basically meditating, staring at a wall all day, holding a trigger. Chang Xin becomes the sword holder, and once this transfer of power, transfer of the trigger takes place and the Trisolarans learn this, they commence not their attack necessarily, but their flying towards Earth. They don't turn around anymore. Now they're heading towards Earth because they know Chang Xin is too kind that she'll never pull that trigger. She'll never broadcast Earth's location or the Trisolarans and be convicted of genocide. the Trisolaran probes that they call droplets come to Earth. They destroy some major cities. They destroy Earth's transmitters. So even if Shenzhen wants to transmit the location, now she no longer can. Sofan, a robotic character who's basically an emissary who has been living on Earth in this deterrence era, now declares to humanity, we're coming for you, we're going to exterminate you. But humanity, a couple billion people, maybe it was 1 or 2 billion, whatever it was, you're going to relocate to Australia. We're going to live everywhere else. Now, not everybody can relocate. Some people stay behind. Very few people. Some are staying behind in their home continents. Some people decide to work for the Trisolarans and hunt people down that are staying behind. But Sofan and the aliens make that declaration, and Earth knows that they can't, at this point, they can't fend off an invasion, so they're doing what the Trisolarans ask and are herded like cattle and living without any technology in Australia. Now, along the same time, a human spaceship that's in outer space called Blue Space, wonky stuff goes on out in outer space. They come across this 4-dimensional tear in space, and there's dead spaces in the solar system where they can't transmit, and the Trisolaran probe droplets that were kind of working with them were getting destroyed. And they just come upon the realization that, that things might be happening on Earth or whatever, that they decide to hit the button. They have their own transmitter. And they come to the conclusion, all right, we're just broadcasting now. We're broadcasting the Trisolaran's location, Earth's location. We're not going back to Earth. It doesn't really matter. So now we're just going to screw everybody. Trisolarans that are on the Sofan on Earth, that robot person from the aliens, realizes this, as do the Trisolarans that are en route to Earth. They're like, shit, we're screwed. We're going to turn around now and find somewhere else to go. They never got there to begin with. The threat of the Trisolarans coming had humans so freaked out that they were doing what the Trisolarans, via their robot emissary Sofan, asked. Plus, they had their droplets, small ships that were just destroying major cities anyway. So now we enter another era in time called the broadcast era. Humanity is migrating back to where they were living from Australia. Earth is now considering sending out a message to the cosmos saying, hey, we're not a threat, guys. Don't worry about us. Please don't come into our solar system and destroy us. And it's a message that they're considering a safety notice that they want to broadcast out there. They have, people out there, people on Earth are figuring out ways to really legitimize Earth not being a threat, destroying their technology, putting stuff in either the air or the water supplies to dumb down the population. So you're essentially going to have the whole world look like everybody that's going to be down at the New Jersey shore this Memorial Day weekend, wearing Genny tees, breathing through their mouths and dragging their knuckles on the boardwalk. During this era, the Trisolarans out in space, I guess because they turned around or changed their vector, wind up finding that capsule that has Yun Tianming's brain in it, and they regrow him. They clone him. And he winds up meeting with his college crush, Cheng Zhen, on it was somewhere in our solar system, but it wasn't in person. It was through some sort of a hologram projection type thing. I'm not going to go into the science of it. And they just talk about themselves. They're being watched by the Trisolarans. So Yun does not give anything dangerous to the humans to work with. But he winds up telling Shenzhen 3 coded fairy tales that are designed to help humanity. Ultimately, it doesn't really, based on what's coming up next. But so that's that point in time, the broadcast era. While I think Earth did broadcast something, it really doesn't matter, because now we enter a new era in time called the bunker era. And this based on one of the coded fairy tales that was told to humanity by Yan Tianming. Humanity basically decides to leave Earth, and they wind up building satellites, and they have ships living on the far side of Jupiter. In case there's an attack on the solar system or the sun explodes, Jupiter could serve as a shield, as a bunker, so humanity doesn't get wiped away. During this era, we learn that the Trisolaran system is totally destroyed by another alien race that's out there. You never find out who. And yet another alien race notices this, realizes that the message came from Earth's solar system. So this third alien race, the Trisolarans, the aliens that destroyed them, and this alien race that observed the destruction, decide to commence an attack on our solar system. This attack is basically in the form of it's described as basically like a sheet of paper, transparent paper, floating through space that the Earth, whatever's left of the Earth fleet, notices, and they start examining it. People can pass their bodies through it. It's not tangible, but eventually winds up turning everything in our solar system two-dimensional, meaning like a flat painting. Doesn't happen all at once. It spreads. And this is kind of playing off of, in book 2 and part of book 3, there are these pockets of four-dimensional space, another reality, another dimension where humans were able to travel through. And if we live in a 3D world, this world was in 4 dimensions, and it's almost incomprehensible to describe. But 2 dimensions is very easy. You draw a picture, that's 2D, right? There's no shape to it. It's just flat. There's no roundness. It's just flat. And that's what our solar system and basically the universe is turning into based on this attack. During this time, Shenzhen awakens from yet another hibernation, escapes our solar system via light speed, and she decides to head to the star system that Yan Tianming had purchased for her, 100 years ago, however long it's been at this point. Decides to head there. And now we're in the galaxy era. Chang goes into hibernation. She arrives at this star system that she owns. 300 years later, she sees 2 planets there and meets another human. He comes aboard their ship, and traveling in the ship does something to the fabric of space and time in this star system. And eventually they wind up traveling so fast that they travel 19 million years into the future as they're orbiting this star or one of the planets. I forget which. They land on one of the planets, which is now empty. Really dumbing this down now, guys. Not dumbing, but just simplifying, because it was just so dense. They find a doorway, a portal, that takes them to a small 1 square kilometer pocket universe where they meet that mechanical robot named Sophon, who was the Trisolaran's representative on Earth, who's living there basically in a cottage or on a farm. And over time, Sophon lets them know that there are other pocket universes out there. And these pocket or micro universes need to empty themselves to refill or repopulate the main universe, which is now flat with mass, with things, to initiate another Big Bang. Essentially. Chen Jin, her male human companion, decide to go to the main universe, whereas right now there's nothing going on. They empty their pocket universe, and they are basically going to fuel another Big Bang, so the universe, their galaxy, planets, life can begin anew. The end. Reading, responses to this, book on social media. And there are people, they're saying that after the book, they were crying, they were depressed, they felt, hopeless and despondent. I don't want to say similar to people that watch Avatar and they get like depressed because they're never going to live on a world like that. Like, guys, grow the fuck up. I mean, it's just a book. It's just a movie. You really want to live on the Avatar world? Go live in the goddamn jungle. Go live in somewhere in South America, Brazil, wherever the rainforests are, and you'll have that life. That's Pandora in the Avatar universe. The book was a bit of a downer. I mean, I didn't think it was going to go 19 million years in the future. So it essentially spans humanity's first go-round in the universe until everybody's kind of reborn again, or the universe is reborn again. I didn't think it would go that route. These different eras were interesting, skipping ahead in time. The science here, guys, this trilogy is considered hard sci-fi. I didn't read book one, watch the series. The Netflix series obviously does a better job of even simplifying some of the concepts more for mass audiences. Great. Book two, not a difficult read. Actually, it wasn't a read, it was a listen. Followed everything. There was some science-y stuff, but I think, the author does a nice job of breaking stuff down, doesn't go too fast, fine. Book three, once you get into like the last, because it's a 25-ish hour listen, once you get to the last 8-ish, 10 hours, it gets hardcore science-y, heavy. And I think I benefited from listening to it, because if I was reading it, I would probably be reading and rereading to maybe understand stuff, whereas listening, it just kept flowing. Did I grasp everything when they're talking about, I can't even remember some of the names they called these things, but I got the gist of it. But book three is where this series earns its hard sci-fi label. And I am very eager. Again, we're a good 3 years away from the concluding final third season of the Three Body Problem on Netflix. But I'm curious how they're going to bring four-dimensional space to life, how two-dimensional destruction or flattening of the world of the universe is going to look, and how much it's jumping around in time. And you have that, a couple character that is like the red thread throughout these different eras, starting from season one, character being season two, season three. So you're still going to have some characters that you're going to follow, but a bunch of new characters as well. Entertaining, book series, thought-provoking from the whole dark forest theory that if there are other civilizations out there, that the method is you would rather be the hunter than the prey. You don't want to ask questions or names. You find someone, you kill them before they can kill you. It's a somewhat logical approach to take, because you don't know what you're dealing with technologically with another species or civilizations. But on the flip side, you could always antagonize another species that is more advanced than you, that if you just kept hiding, it would be better than, found you, you didn't see me, but I'm going to provoke and I'm going to attack first. It's all speculative fiction, obviously. I'm a firm believer that there's too many stars out there, and the odds that we are the only planet with life in the universe is so remote. And the approach that they took was interesting, dramatic in terms of like a book series. And I guess, a little bit depressing, but again, to me, it's just a story. I'm not going to get depressed and need medication just because of how, gloomy a book was. I think, everyone's got to just either strap on a pair of ovaries and just kind of like man and woman up and just realize it's just a story, right? Now, something on a bit of a brighter note, but if you haven't watched the Netflix series, it's good. You want to read the books, I would recommend them, or listen to the audiobooks, I would recommend them. Hopefully I didn't ruin everything for you, but kept my interest. Certainly kept my interest. So let's conclude with comics from basically, nearly 20 years ago, 19 years ago, the OMAC project from DC, 2005, written by Greg Rucka and illustrated by Jesus Saiz. This was a lead up to the Infinite Crisis series written by Jeff Johns. It's not a direct lead-in because there were other, comic series that were part of the lead-in, but it's something that I wanted to read for a while. And I'm trying to buy as many trade paperbacks as I can of things that I've wanted to read for a while. Starting here, and the story is essentially Batman creating a satellite in outer space called Brother Eye, which is designed to literally keep an eye on or watch of superhumans, metahumans throughout the globe, not intervening, just keeping an eye on. And if things got out of hand, he wound up creating these humanoid sentinels called OMACs, OMAC, observational metahuman activity constructs that could intervene if superheroes, metahumans were getting out of hand. Now, the satellite and the OMACs are taken over by Maxwell Lord. And if you're not sure who that is, and if you've seen the second Wonder Woman movie Wonder Woman 85, which was wildly disappointing on every level, he was the main villain played by, was it Pedro Pascal from The Mandalorian, who had the power of granting wishes by speaking to people or having people ask them something or confirm something. He was able to grant a wish. In the comic series, it's basically mind control. He can get people to do what he wants. Blue Beetle winds up investigating, money that's disappearing and things that are disappearing, from his accounts. Tracks down Maxwell Lord, who is now the leader of a covert organization called Checkmate. And Maxwell Lord kills him, basically shoots him in the head. And this was during the early 2000s where DC was getting in a very gritty phase. Heroes dying in gritty ways, more adult storylines, which, a couple of years later, they rebooted and did the, New 52 and are more about hope now, which is always what DC was about, but they kind of went through their grunge phase, so to speak. Maxwell Lord takes over the satellite, takes over the OMACs, actually winds up infecting millions of other people with this nanotechnology that turns them into OMACs. But between then and taking over the satellite, Superman winds up going to confront him. Actually, he doesn't wind up going to confront him. Maxwell Lord winds up controlling Superman's mind. And when Wonder Woman goes to confront Maxwell Lord, because since she's a goddess, she can't be controlled that way, Maxwell Lord gets Superman to fight her. And they fight, it's a couple page, sprawling battle. I think Superman winds up breaking her wrist. They both slug each other, across cities and continents. They get back to the base where Maxwell Lord is at, and she ties him up with a lasso of truth and says, tell me how to, stop doing this to Superman. Tell me how to stop it. He's like, well, you have to kill me. And after deliberation, she does. She snaps his neck, which was huge at the time and even now for Wonder Woman because she doesn't kill people. Now, if you're talking about demons or robots or aliens, like Darkseid, the main bad guy, things like that, yeah, everybody kills them. It's not a big deal. But when it comes to human beings, Superman doesn't. Batman obviously has kind of a no-kill policy, and Wonder Woman, above all, has that outlook. That gets recorded and broadcast to the world by the Brother Eye computer system, and it causes people to be wary of superheroes, of metahumans, that if Wonder Woman could be driven to this, who else could? And that's one of the threads that gets led into the Infinite Crisis series that comes out, 3, 6, 9 months later, whatever it is. The end of the comic run, a couple million people are turned into these OMAC sentient beings. The heroes gather in the Sahara Desert, the OMACs converge upon them, and Batman activates a mass EMP to disable all of the OMACs. I think it's said afterwards that there's about 200,000 left in existence. They don't really talk about if the heroes kind of defeat them or save the people that are covered with this OMAC sentient casing, if you want to call it that. It was a good and interesting read. The big thing, again, was the Wonder Woman snapping the neck of Maxwell Lord. Something that I wanted to read for a while, Batman being neurotic, creating that satellite, creating beings that could help keep, metahumans under control if they get a little uppity. but interesting. And I've bought, a couple other trades that I'm going to be reading in the next week or so that as I finish them, if it's interesting enough, I'll share with you guys. But we went with a book and a comic book series to conclude the plus section. And 2 recommendations as well. I mean, I'm I read Image Comics, Marvel Comics, DC Comics. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it, that the DC stuff is just so much more close-knit and intimate in just not a sexual way, but in a smallness way, that when big stuff happens, the Trinity is involved. It's Batman, it's Superman, it's Wonder Woman. These events really bring together a lot of the main characters in the DC universe, versus sometimes it's just something that the Avengers are going through, or the X-Men, or Spider-Man and his Rogues Gallery. It's very rare that everything is brought together, although one of the next trade paperbacks I will be reading and reviewing is the Secret Wars reboot from, I think it was 2010, written by Jonathan Hickman, which essentially brings the vast majority of superheroes in the Marvel Universe together. Once I have that read, I will share with all of you as well. But that concludes the podcast for today and this week. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time from your busy day to make us part of your listening routine. The next podcast will drop next Tuesday or Wednesday. We're on a 1-a-week podcast unless something major happens in 49er world. But again, thank you so much for listening. Much appreciated. Until we talk again next week, have a very happy, healthy, and safe Memorial Day weekend wherever you are spending it. And if you are heading down to the Jersey Shore this weekend, beware of those mouth-breathing, guinea tea-wearing knuckle draggers, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast. Take care, everyone. We'll talk soon.